Dr. Amita Bhide will talk on understanding the urban conceptuality. I would like to introduce her. Dr. Amita Bhide, currently as an associate professor in the School of Habitat Studies, is the chairperson of the Center of Urban Planning, Policy and Governance in the school. She also was the convener for the master's program in Habitat Policy and Practice, contributing to developing and delivering the program in its initial years. She has been engaged in teaching at TISS for over 16 years. She has done her doctoral studies from the Department of Sociology, University of Mumbai. Her areas of interest are urban development and habitat issues, particularly focusing on housing, livelihood, and poverty, and as well as governance. She has undertaken research projects in these areas in collaboration with governmental organizations and social actions groups. She is also closely associated with field intervention related to these issues. She has been involved in several committees of the local and state government in addressing issues of housing and poverty. Dr. Bhide is a recipient of the inaugural fellowship awarded by the India-China Institute of New School University, New York. I welcome Dr. Bhide on behalf of us.
I have tried to title this presentation in terms of ever since kind of taking up the challenge of being part of a school of habitat studies in TISS. One of the challenges and one of the questions that we have been grappling with is how do we conceptualize the urban? I am located in a center for urban planning, policy and governance. Okay? And yet I think every year we are coming up with new and new perhaps answers or questions to this thing of how does one understand the urban. And trying to really find a understanding which is rooted in our local understandings. Perhaps I tried to title this trying to develop an Indian lens on urbanization. Whether talking about an Indian lens is also appropriate, I'm not very sure, but I'm going to definitely use this opportunity to raise some of the questions that I have been grappling with. Okay? And I really thank Vatsaru and Unique Academy for giving me this opportunity. Okay? I think the first thing that perhaps the association with urban is really कि urban is equal to urbanization is equal to modernity. And this is a particular equation which has really developed over, I think, the last century in the world, beginning, and it had its locus in the European-centric, US-centric models of urbanization which emerged. Okay? And I think this is important to understand. Okay? We know that cities have existed from times immemorial. We are also, I think, aware that in India itself, if you start looking at the history of cities, then it stretches back over 5 millennia. 5 millennium years ago, we talk of cities of Harappa, of Mohenjo-daro, extremely well architectured and planned urban systems which existed. But I think the current time is one which is actually called a urban age. Okay? So talking of the urban in an urban age is a very, very different thing from trying to talk about cities and the way they have existed historically. So this is not just trying to conceptualize the urban for all times, trying to evolve like a time constant definition. But we are talking of a concept of urban which evolves over time, and it is talking of understanding the urban in an urban age. Okay. What is this urban age associated with and how has it evolved? I think very clearly it is associated with the evolution or the rise of industrial capitalism and its evolution as a world system. Not just capitalism which is confined to a particular place, but capitalism as it has expanded the world over. And I think this is important to understand. The kind of forces which are driving the current notions of the urban are not located just within the urban. They are not just located within the region. They are not just located within this entity called the nation state, but they are also systems which are networked through the world. The second thing I feel that we need to appreciate also, that this is an accentuation and continuation of processes which have begun in some ways. The inception of the world system was with colonization, was with the association with prosperity in the world. We are not just talking of development, I am not just talking of growth, I am talking of prosperity. And the concomitant or the other part of that prosperity being actually heightened inequality. So these three are actual strong correlates of this world called urban. You have the industrial capitalism and its evolution as a world system. You have colonization as a precursor to this industrial capitalism. You have prosperity and you have inequality. But at the same time, this urban is also associated with other things. What are these? This is the idea of science, the idea of using technology for the good of humanity, the idea of something called public health, okay, which is very, very different from health as a private activity, and of public health engineering, again a very, very different concept, and the application of all of these sciences together to create something called a place science. I think it is surely a miracle in some ways when you start conceptualizing the fact that today the huge densities that live in cities and the technologies that make it possible for so many people to live in closely packed areas, okay, and the science which accompanies that, whether it is architecture, whether it is planning, whether it is engineering, whether it is the overall sanitation and water systems, all of that go along with it. So one has to understand that place making has also very clearly associated with the making of something of a city. And in many ways, therefore, urbanization has also been associated with what one would call modernity. So one needs to understand the overlaps between many of these concepts together and yet decipher what is it that is classically urban. Because many of these ideas have developed together, they have developed concomitantly, and sometimes it may be difficult to understand the separation between these. So we have to understand at one level the correlations, at another level try to also discern the differences between all of these. Okay. Now if that is a notion of the urban which is really emerging from a Western lens. I am saying this is a Western lens because what one is experiencing, I think, in India and in some other parts of the world is a very, very different form of urbanization. Okay. By saying very different form, I am not trying to pose Western urbanization and what is happening here as two different poles altogether. But certainly there is a tremendous difference in the trajectories of urbanization. So how are we looking at Indian cities? If you start adopting a Western lens and try to understand what is happening here, then the terms which you will typically come about with, one is dependent industrialization. Okay. What do you mean by dependent industrialization? Something which has not emerged and does not have a local impetus. Okay. You do not have a technology, you do not have a surplus which is local, and therefore you are actually becoming a site of production in a world system where there is no independent capital driving which is happening from here. Okay. Saskia Sassen, a very, very famous sociologist, talks of a concept of a networked cities. Okay. And within these networked cities, she talks of certain cities which are world cities. Okay. Today in India, we are talking of world class cities. Please remember, world class cities are very, very different from world cities. Okay. Now these world cities are conceptualized as those centers of power in the world which manage the entire network of cities. So strategic management of cities, of different enterprises throughout the world is happening in these world cities. Okay, so you may have New York, you have Shanghai, you have Tokyo, you have Hong Kong, which have San Francisco, London, which are really counted as the world cities. Now, where are we within all of these drivers of urbanization? We are definitely very, very strongly urbanizing. But at the same time, we need to recognize that our urbanization is not a urbanization which is having independent stimuli of its own. That it is something which is very, very contingent upon this world system. The second thing that one sees and talks about Indian urbanization from a Western lens is basically that we have dual economies. Okay. Now, what do we mean by dual economies? Something which has been recognized for a long time, but the organized workforce, organized industry, okay, all of this association with industry which has happened in the West, if you start looking at that in relation to India, one actually finds that cities are sites of informal industry, informal workforce. More than 92% of the workforce which is actually working in the informal sector. And if one starts looking at the trends within cities, then these proportion of informal workers are increasing even more. So the site which should have been the site of organization of labor, organization of capital, is actually being experienced as a site where capital and workforce is actually not, I would say, disorganized, but appears very, very informal. Okay. The third phenomenon, which again from a Western lens, if you start looking at Indian cities, then you see extremely large cities. Okay. Now this is something which is very, very interesting. Vijay Kunjir ji in his introduction talked about the fact that cities were expected to be naturally small in size, right? And there were things about how does a balanced urbanization take place. Okay? What proportion of population in cities is linked and coterminous with a particular level of economic development of a country. Okay? These are the kind of questions that when one uses, then the cities in this part of the world appear as overgrown cities. Okay? The terms which are often used are primate cities. Okay? Like for example, if you look at Thailand, okay, and the role of Bangkok in Thailand, then Bangkok has over 60% of the GDP of Thailand is generated in Bangkok city alone. If you start looking at urbanization, then you have over 2/3 population of Thailand which is actually resident in Bangkok. So it's like there is very little left of the country in some ways other than Bangkok. Okay? And therefore the concept of primate cities. Similarly, the concept of over-urbanization, where you are saying that the size of urbanization, the proportion of urbanization is not commensurate with the level of economic development. Okay? I think the most important challenge which has really confounded Western lenses is two aspects of our urbanization and which we need to look at. One is that here urbanization has not been coterminous with prosperity, but here urbanization has been coterminous with poverty. Okay. And I think the second thing that one needs to recognize is that urbanization has not meant creation of a place science, but one is experiencing urbanization as a lack of order or as chaos. Okay. And I think it is these two things which really propel Western lenses. This is the Western notion. You use that thing of how urbanization has happened in the West, and you are using those lenses to examine the kind of urbanization which is happening here. Okay. The question to grapple with is, are these appropriate lenses? Are we over urbanized? Are we having dual urbanization? What does dependent industrialization mean? And seen in that fashion, it seems to be almost as if all decisions about urbanization, we do not have any agency at all. India is like a garib bechara country, locked between the designs of capital and our cities kind of grow even more or maybe shrink in response to the whims and fancies of that external capital, which may come and go. Because today it may catch, Indian capital may catch the fancy of foreign capital. Tomorrow it may be Chinese capital or it may be Ethiopian capital for that matter, right? So there are severe limitations, I would say, to using the Western lens of urbanization. And I think it is high time, perhaps I think the challenge for several people who work linked to cities and who do work linked to cities is basically how does one conceptualize urbanization in India through an Indian lens? Is that necessary? Okay. So what is the challenge of this kind of an Indian lens? Suppose we even say that we want to develop an Indian lens to understand a city and to understand what is urban. I think the first challenge is that just the scale of the urban. Okay. What does the urban mean in India? It just does not mean Mumbai, Pune, Nashik, the golden corridor or the golden triangle of Maharashtra. Okay. It just does not mean Bangalore. It just does not mean the corridor of Delhi, Gurgaon and the NCR region. But it means really, if you go by census 2011, then we have 7,036 towns in India, which are all labeled urban, with over 337 million population living in the urban, nearly 29.78 or so percentage of people who are living in the urban. Now, how does one understand even the scale of this urbanization? What do I mean by this scale of urbanization? Today, understanding the dynamics of a tiny town in Karnataka called Timbuktu and understanding the dynamics of a city, a metro city which is expanding rapidly and defying all notions of urbanizations which were ever known to the Western world. Okay? To the Western world, Tokyo and New York are like high population cities. I think the way we are urbanizing, Mumbai is emerging rapidly as one of the largest cities of the world. Okay? And using a science which these countries and these cities have never ever applied. Okay? So, how does one build a linkage between this scale? How does one do justice to the diversity of this urbanization? So, I think this is one of the most primary challenges in defining or understanding an Indian lens. No, I'll just take 1 minute. I think the third perhaps important fact is that when we look at the urban in India, we cannot see one trend, that the Indian urban is composed of several contradictory and intersecting trends. Okay. What do I mean by this contradictory and intersecting trends? Okay. I remember one classical article, if you are really taking interest in understanding urban affairs, then you must have heard of Professor Amitabh Kundu and his interpretation of the demographics of Indian urbanization. Okay. About 2 years ago, Professor Kundu wrote an article in EPW talking about how Indian cities and the migration to Indian cities is becoming very, very exclusive, in the sense that it is the better off in terms of social parameters, economic parameters, who are actually migrating to the cities. And you see that poor people are not coming to the cities at all. Now, if you start looking at this at a micro level, you will actually see that this is not quite true. In fact, the dynamic of migration that one is seeing today is that cities themselves are becoming very, very large entities. And you actually see poor populations often congregating at the periphery of the cities, and areas which are called now metropolitan areas or peripheral urbanization which is taking place, whereas the core of the city often is becoming very, very exclusive. This is true. Okay? Again, if you apply the same pattern to what is happening around Bangalore, then the reverse is true. Because what is happening is the exclusive part of urbanization there is actually happening on the periphery, where there are several new townships, private townships which are developing. Whereas it is the core of Bangalore which is actually being occupied by increasing amounts of the poor. So what am I trying to suggest? You do not see urbanization happening as one cogent trend. There are several contrary trends, intersecting trends which are shaping, and this is perhaps also because of the diversity of the country, the diversity of climatic conditions, economic conditions in different parts of the country. So understanding the urban through one particular theoretical lens, through one particular conceptual lens is really a challenge. I think the fourth challenge is something which is actually emerging out of the narrowness of a national lens. As I said, increasingly today one is finding that the urban is actually being determined through not just a local system, but through a system which is a globalized system, which is a world system, a transnational system, if you may call it. Okay? And this happens in very interesting ways, not just through capital. I'll just give you one interesting story here. In Mumbai, about 6 years ago, the municipality tried to privatize the water supply. Okay? Now the contestation to that privatization of water supply, many of the activists actually drew lessons from what happened in Johannesburg. They linked up with activists in Johannesburg. Okay? What am I trying to suggest here? Basically, it is not just foreign capital which is driving these forces, but the transnational space is also a contestation space sometimes. Okay? So one needs to understand that within this contemporary space, which is increasingly global, does a national focus, does a national lens, does a Indian lens make sense? Okay? And if so, what should be the nature of that Indian lens also? Perhaps it should be enough to appreciate local realities, but at the same time, whether it should be parochial or whether it is looking forward, I think this is also something that one needs to think of. Because today, if you will again see in terms of policy, okay, every policy document, and irrespective of the change in parties in power, all of them will unequivocally take the stance, urbanization is the growth engine for the country. Okay? Now when we take this kind of a stance of urbanization is the growth engine for the country, first of all, what kind of urbanization is the growth engine for the country? What kind of growth are we conceptualizing? And I think what I am trying to suggest to all of you is that urban does not mean one thing. Urban means several things. Urban means several layers. So it is not enough to say urbanization is the growth engine of the country. We need to look deeply about what kind of urbanization, what shape of urbanization, and what kind of growth do we even seek for the country. Yeah. So I'll now try to get into these different layers of conceptualizing the urban. Okay. So far, what we tried to basically look at is Western lenses of urbanization, and we tried to say if we have to develop an Indian lens, then what are the challenges in developing that Indian lens? Okay. So my first question here would be, can we conceptualize a city as a place? Okay. This is the approach which perhaps we follow in censuses. This is the approach which is followed in geography most popularly as a discipline. And how do we define then when we conceptualize the city as a place? Then in India we use the census definition. The census definition typically is based on 3 parameters. One is the parameter of population size. The second is the parameter of population density. And the third is the parameter of people who are involved in non-agricultural work. Okay. So how does the census definition for India for urban read? It is a place with more than 5,000 population, It's a place with a density of more than 400 persons per square kilometer, and it is a place where more than 75% of the population is engaged in non-agricultural work. Okay. Now, having taken these kind of parameters and defining this as a place, okay, what does this mean? Okay. Let me come to the interesting questions which arise in India because of defining and understanding the urban sheerly as a place. Okay. 7,036 is the number of towns which is given to us by the census. Okay. These are the places which are urban places. Okay. Within this, I'll just take you back to census 2001. Okay. And I'll take you to the comparison of two states, Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, and what happened to them in census 2001. In census 2001, while it followed the same definition of 5,000 people, 75%, etc., it largely went by the governmental definition of what is declared as urban is urban. Am I making sense? What is declared as urban is urban. It did not declare new places as urban which fit these criteria given by the census. Okay. As a result, you had two interesting situations develop. Maharashtra, okay, Maharashtra had over 500 plus places which fit all the census definition parameters, but which were still non-urban. Okay. Tamil Nadu, on the other hand, declared all of these places which fit the census definition as urban into urban centers, okay, administratively also. Okay. And so you had a situation where Tamil Nadu suddenly defined all parameters which census trajectories had shown. Tamil Nadu was the highest urbanized state according to census 2001, whereas Maharashtra, the proportion of urbanization remained just a little over 40%. Okay. This was in census 2001. Okay. Now, which of these approaches is correct? Okay. I am raising a question before you. Okay. Is the census doing a certain kind of activism in declaring all places urban? Is the administration, including politicians plus bureaucrats, being bullheaded when they are not declaring certain places as urban? What are the dynamics which inhibit the administrative declaration of the urban? Okay. I would urge you to read a very, very interesting article by K.C. Sivaram-Krishnan, who was a secretary, ex-secretary of the Government of India for Urban Development. Okay. And he makes this very interesting conclusion that in India, the kind of overall administrative systems that we have, there is a greater incentive for administrations to remain rural. Okay. So what is this system of incentives and disincentives in places that exist? Cities means greater bureaucracy. Cities mean settlement plans, building plans which require approvals. Cities mean greater taxes. Okay. On the other hand, rural means more subsidies. Rural means less taxes. And rural means less rules, no building plans, and no settlement plans, definitely. Okay. This is how we have actually converted the meaning of the rural and the urban. Okay. Which is why in city after city in India, and especially in Maharashtra, you are seeing cases of villages which refuse to become urban. Okay. And you have greater incentives for what? To stay rural in some ways. Okay. This is creating tons of challenges. Now I think in terms of just complicating this entire issue of census activism, administrative bullheadedness, as I said, is another issue of dense villages. We have conceptualized villages to be places that require subsidies, less taxes, no planning. Why? Why have we conceptualized in that fashion? Because these are places where densities are low. But on the other hand, if you are going to have a substantive number of villages which are 5,000 plus population staying in a confined geographical area, you will need to think of these villages as a separate category altogether. Right? On the other hand, we can also face the dilemma and the question which was faced in Tamil Nadu. After census 2001, when Tamil Nadu declared all the census towns as urban areas, 1 year into the process, it had to disqualify several places from being urban because they were unable to generate that amount of taxation and revenue. Okay? So what does urban really mean? How does one distinguish this urban? And how does one first of all prevent declaration of the urban, understanding of the urban as being a political tool? I think one of the most classical examples here is of Kharghar. Do any of you know Kharghar? Kharghar, which is just on the outskirts of Navi Mumbai, between Panvel and Navi Mumbai. Kharghar, which is a location of several NRI complexes, okay? Several restaurants, several colleges, where a railway passes, is a Gram Panchayat. Okay? A very, very interesting place, and how it remains as a rural whole in an urban system, okay? And how it has been kept as a rural whole, and what is the purpose that it serves. What I am trying to suggest to you, dear friends, is that there are multiple complexities today to understanding city as just a place with particular parameters, which makes many of the data systems that we have also suspect. And therefore, one needs to think of how does one address these questions within even thinking of what is the extent of urbanization in India. And this is not just a polemical question. Okay? I am trying to ask this also as a highly political question. Okay? Year after year, I think till the 1980s roughly, the attitude within India was to look upon the city with certain amount of suspicion, okay? Not to invest in the city, and consistently making the declaration of India lives in its villages, okay? To not invest in the city. This does not mean that we concertedly worked on rural development. Professor Desarda will critique me on this, but I am trying to argue that we didn't invest in our cities in a planned manner at all. And this attitude suddenly changed in 1986 with the National Commission on Urbanization, and since then we have started looking upon urbanization with a great amount of positivity. This has impacted the numbers on the urban, the defining of the urban also. How has it affected that? Because we have been predicting and using UN population projections which talk about India will be half urbanized by 2015. India will be 60% urbanized by whatever. Going down the line, there are different cities which project themselves in that fashion. And one is seeing that these projections are not coming true. There is an issue in India. Okay? I'll give you two quick examples. Udaipur, which projected itself that it would have a 500,000 plus population from 1970 to 1990, did not even achieve 400,000 population, okay, by the stipulated time frame. Look at Ratnagiri again, okay, another town, small town, which has predicted population growth rates which it has never been able to achieve. Okay. So this projection of population and how much will be urban, and then going down the line to all of these cities, is a political game which we have played in order to capture land, in order to perpetuate certain kinds of developments. Okay? Indian parameters on census have been fairly conservative, which is good. Okay? And I think we need to understand the fact that our trajectory of urbanization is not one of rapid urbanization. It is a very, very moderate and a very, very modest growth in urbanization. We are not urbanizing at more than what, 3% per year, and where roughly 2% is our population growth rate, which means that our rate of urbanization and conversion of rural to urban population is about 1% or a little over 1%. I think this is something that we need to appreciate. We need to really ask the question that if we want to promote urbanization, then what kind of urbanization do we actually want? A comparison with China here would be very, very illustrative. Okay? In China and India had roughly the same equivalent proportions of urbanization till the 1960s. Okay? And post that, today more than 60% of China's population stays in towns and cities. And it defines urban in a more conservative way. There more than 10,000 population places are called towns. Here 5,000 plus places are called towns. And even then our urbanization rate is, or proportion is 29%. So look at the growth trajectories that we have. We need to ask the question, or why are we not becoming adequately urbanized? What is the growth dynamic that we are actually experiencing? What is it that is holding back people in the rural areas when actually rural incomes have been going down? What is it that is not enabling people to settle down in cities even when one is seeing so many symptoms of agricultural distress which are happening all around us? And I think those become the critical questions when one is starting to understand the urban in the Indian context. Okay? In terms of place, therefore, I want to just suggest that it is very, very erroneous to begin and end our understanding of urban as a place. Rather, I think in the Indian context, it would be much more advisable to think of urban as a continuum of settlements with differing characteristics. Okay? Having said that, one needs to perhaps also review what is our definition of rural. And that is why I said we need to understand the rural and then the urban and the city as a continuum of settlements with differing characteristics which start escalating. There are people who propose that instead of seeing the urban as a place, we should now start to think of it as a lifestyle. A lifestyle which is based on built environment, okay, more concrete structures, more artificially created environments as urban, and the more natural constructed environments as rural. One indicator. In fact, there are studies which are being done in this fashion. There is a very interesting project called Geopolis. And what it is doing is that because of all these fallacies of Indian census, it has adopted a model of mapping constructions, concrete constructions, okay, and the density of constructions as a way to understand the urban. Okay. Now this can also have questions, okay, but I'm trying to say it. So this is one interesting project, okay, because it has a different notion of the urban. Okay, look at artificially constructed environments, dense built environments as an indicator of the urban. The second could be in terms of looking at consumption as an indicator of urban. If we introduce and understand the urban as a lifestyle which is bent on consumption of all kinds, okay, not production of natural goods but rather consumption, then could that be an indication of urban? Could the generation of revenue and taxes be an indicator of the urban? Now all of these are lifestyle linked indicators. Okay? But we have to keep in mind that these can also be within themselves problematic indicators. Why can they be problematic indicators? On one hand, we need to understand that rurality is also changing and urbanism is also changing. Okay? On one level, you will see, like, I come from Konkan region. I just returned from my native place after a couple of days of stay, and I'm finding my village a very different entity from what I remember as a child. Okay? There is not one single hut today ki people would rather construct in concrete rather than constructing in the chira stone, which is so native to the Konkan region. Okay? People would construct in closely packed settlements. There are many more wadis today than what I remember as a child. The number of houses sheerly has increased so much more. Okay? And the boundaries between 2 or 3 villages, what I understand as my village Panchakroshi, is a very different entity of and densely built, I would say, structures than what I remember as a child. So the understanding of rurality is different. I'm sure that soon the question which will be asked is, does staying in rural area and does staying in a village means staying without a road, staying without electricity, staying without a school, staying without a hospital? And if we start bringing in all of these dimensions and these very much become part of the rural lifestyle, then what does rurality remain as distinct from urbanity? If rurality is also based on consumption, then we really need to think forward and think of what should and what really distinguishes the village from the city. And I think this kind of a desirability. Today is really a day when we start talking about there are urban visions. I know there is a lecture ahead where Shruti Tambe is going to talk about visions of the city. I'll not get into that. But what I'm trying to say is that just as cities have future visions, I'm sure villages also have future visions. And how would those visions look like? Are they village-like, or what we understand today as being village-like, or are they city-like? And if so, then can a lifestyle be confined to a place? Okay? And whether the place can be the parameter or the lifestyle can be the parameter for understanding the urban. This is an additional complexity, I think, that we have to recognize. There is another dimension in which the urban has always been understood, and I want to also introduce that. The urban as an economic hub. Okay? So cities have always been recognized as sites of capital, as sites of trade. Particularly in the version of urbanism that we are seeing, where industrial capital has been a driver, cities were at that point seen as sites of mass production, mass living, and the city was seen as a binder place in some ways, which brings production, distribution together. Okay? And that also, perhaps to certain philosophers and I would say theorists like Henry Lefebvre, he talked about then the urban as the site of the revolution. Why did he think of the urban as the site of revolution? Because for him, if you start looking at the trajectory of human beings and how they have evolved and how human societies have evolved, then he says that the alienation from nature is the basic principle along which it's not just capital, okay, but along with capital, so there are two forces which are constantly driving human societies. So one has been the changing nature of capital and the technology in capital, the means of production, and the second has actually been the alienation from nature. And he says that in the urban, this alienation from nature becomes complete, okay, and therefore then people start demanding how space is created. If the rural was seen as where space is something which human beings produce, then the city becomes a space which is mass produced, factory produced, and which is how we are seeing so many people poor, homeless. I mean, these are all issues we have never thought of that. No, think about how birds house themselves, think of how animals house themselves, and think of how human beings are homeless, right? It's a complete alienation of nature in a artificially produced environment, right? So from that point of view, Henry Lefebvre conceptualized the city also as a site of struggle, the city also as a site for revolution, where one could perhaps conceptualize freedom from both enforcing capitalism as well as alienating nature, where people try to demand being co-producers of space and capital. What has happened instead? One has actually seen the shift from industrial cities to now cities which are becoming sites of financial capital. There is a different dimension and a different trajectory of that financial capital, and it is producing a very different space of the city. If one thought of the city as mass living, where so many people stay together, okay, the future city is looking as a very, very fragmented geography. Okay. What do I mean by this fragmented geography and fragmented living? You had to have water supply systems which were centralized. Okay. You had to have sewage systems, sanitation systems which were centralized. That is what I talk about mass living. Okay. But in today's cities, you have technology which makes it possible to have independent, fragmented infrastructure. Okay. One is already seeing this kind of a geography take shape. For example, Government of India introduced in 2005 the entire scheme for having special townships. What are special townships? Special townships have independent infrastructure, transport infrastructure, water infrastructure, electricity which is independent, systems which are disconnected in some ways from the city. Okay. So what are we seeing here? Okay, tomorrow's city or the emergent city may not necessarily be a site of collectivity. In fact, it may be a very, very fragmented site. Okay. And this is something again that we need to look at, the nature of the future city. Okay. This is how capital is producing itself, and this is one of the driving reasons for all of this may actually be that one is seeing production as also being decentralized, because production is no longer mass production, that production itself has become very, very informalized and decentralized production. One may actually see cities also emerge as very fragmented geographies. In India, I think taking hold of this Indian lens brings us to another question of thinking of urban as sheerly real estate. And I think it's an important dimension again. A researcher activist from Bangalore, A.R. Vasavi, has written a very interesting piece again, which you may like to look at, which is called The Nation as Real Estate. Okay. I'm using only part of that idea to talk about how do we understand the urban as real estate. Okay. And I want to bring in two concepts here. One, I think throughout the world today you have a connected world of investment. People in India buying property in Dubai, London. You must have seen on page 3 that someone like Amir Khan has brought a house in Dubai, someone else has brought a summer home in London, etc. Okay. Now these are investments which have become in some ways commonplace. Okay. This is, I think it's also linked to the economic cycles of both economic buoyancy and economic slowdown. When industrial production slows down, people begin to invest in real estate. Okay. And as you begin to invest in real estate, you're always in the search of new and new geographies of this kind of investment. Always you will see that there is a new model which is being discovered. There is a China model, or there is a India model, or there is a Singapore model, or some other model, right? In fact, you may be aware now that India itself is also investing in several African countries, and there is land being bought up in very, very big proportions by Indian companies in many of these African countries. We need to understand that today cities are becoming a key site of real estate investment, investment in land as opposed to investment in production. And when the city becomes a site of real estate, it only encourages the amount of consumption and the kind of fragmentation that I indicated earlier. So this is something that one needs to bear in mind. And this has two kinds of implication. One, that it expands the geographies of extension of capital. As I said, consistently discovering a new model to emerge. And the second implication of this is that there are huge emergent conflicts over land. Okay, what is local? Who does land belong to? What is the relevant and most important use of land? Whether land has a functional use of production, or whether land only has an instrumental use in terms of living, expanding, investing, etc. Okay? In cities like Mumbai, this question becomes like an extreme question, where you see 90% properties which are unoccupied, vacant. Okay? And you may see so many people then who are staying in slums. So it's like a ultimate contrasting kind of a thing which is linked to seeing the urban as real estate. So this is another thing that one needs to be aware of. So concluding from all of this, how does one conceptualize the urban today? I would see that the urban really consists of multiple layers. And from these multiple layers, one needs to, if one begins to conceptualize the urban, so see it through the social lens, see it through a natural resource lens, see it through a economic lens, see it through a geographical lens. And I think seeing in all of these lenses, one begins to understand also the promise and the perils of urbanization. So the promise of the urbanization, yes, we understand that the urbanization can be indeed an engine of growth. We know that it can be a site of ideation. We know that it can be a site of cross-cultural, plural, accommodative, understanding living, of progressive thinking, right? On the other hand, we also understand that urban can exacerbate only predatory growth and enhanced fragility of societies to conflict, to violence and to ecological disasters. I'll stop here and we can go for questions.